Hello and welcome to Front Page. First came the mother of all deals with Europe, structured, slow, bureaucratic. Now, hello daddy, the father of all deals with America. And let me of course tell you, the energy is completely different. For months, Indian exporters were trapped in a trade horror film. The villain, a 50% tariff wall, plus a very nasty punitive duty on top because of the Russian oil. More than of course hurting margins, it flattened the sentiment. Competitiveness had vanished, and of course the panic was sky high. But tonight, we shall of course see the plot twist. Donald Trump calls Narendra Modi. Da, 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 da. Once the phone is put down, with it, the wall between the two countries comes down as well. The US confirms tariffs on Indian goods are slashed to 18%. That extra penalty for buying Russian oil has been rescinded. Overnight, Indian manufacturing transitions from just surviving to starting to breathe. Because 50% tariffs mean one is definitely dead in the water. But at about 18%, one starts to float and swim back to life. It is simple math. Lower landed cost means more orders. The markets know it, and Reuters confirms the almost instant shift in sentiment. But you know what? Hold on. We all know that there is no such thing as a free lunch, especially in geopolitics. But of course, there's always leverage. India does get tariff relief, for sure. That's surely the headline win. But the real question is, what did India give in return? Why I ask this is because if you read the US press release very carefully, the price tag is much higher than it first appears. Trump is presenting this as a very massive clean trade win, very transactional by the way. He's saying India will scale back on Russian oil, that it will pivot towards US energy, maybe even Venezuela crude. That said, then of course there's the headline number. A commitment to buy $500 billion worth of US goods, energy, tech, coal. That is $500 billion. That's the figure he wants everyone to remember and for everyone to resonate with. Modi, on the other hand, is being far more measured. The public messaging focuses on the 18%. It talks about partnership and never really actually confirms the $500 billion figure explicitly, which is, of course, I feel, very classic narrative warfare. One side is selling this as a straight-up trade deal, while the other is framing it as diplomatic breakthrough. And the space between those two very stories is actually where the real story breathes into life. You know what? Let's be honest. This is not so much about textiles, but more so about energy. The United States exerted the tariff pain to squeeze India on the one specific thing, which is Moscow. India used Russian crude to keep inflation down since 2022, and Washington hated this. But now, of course, that the deal is on the table, this is what it states. It states that the US drops the tax and India stops the purchase of Russian oil. But it is not that simple. If India cuts Russian crude, what does one do about supply? The United States want to step in and fill that gap. But oil from the United States is much costlier. The other option, which can bridge the gap, is Venezuela. But it presents a logical and political minefield, which brings us to the analysts who are asking the very obvious question, which is, what are the terms? What is the price? Because if the energy bill goes up, the tariff win gets erased. If we take a moment and observe the timing, it actually starts to feel very, very interesting. We feel this has not come to life in isolation. Just days before this call, we all remember, India had rolled out a very major policy update, a tax holiday, running all the way till 2047 for foreign companies, offering cloud services out of India data centers. What India effectively told the hyperscalers, establish your compute here, serve the world from here, and we won't tax you on any of it. A strong data center play, which means the first step is to stabilize the tech policy, which leads to attracting the big capital. And once that's cemented, the tariff relief starts to make more sense. Exports, energy, compute, they all start to line up, not as separate but as parts of the same strategy. I believe building leverage does not come to light on the basis of just one deal. It requires stacking up advantages, one on top of the other. The EU deal, which is the mother, which was of course far more structural. Tariffs on cars slashed from 110% to 10%. Legal frameworks have a long runway. The US deal, dubbed the father, is a lot more tactical, a lot more high voltage, fast, loud, and it is tied up directly to the news cycle. EU is the fine print, but the US has a megaphone and India needs both. Because in the present world climate of 2026, having options represents power. Domestically though, if we were to understand where do we stand, the opposition leaders are calling it Trump Nirbharta. They're asking why does India learn about the deal terms and conditions of all the places from Trump's social media field? Yeah, that's a very valid question. So if the final agreement looks one-sided, that criticism becomes very fair. And as we all of course know, if agriculture gets exposed, the consequences will be explosive. But having said that, the above, if India secured the 18% without crossing its own red lines, that to me, ladies and gentlemen, is a big victory. And here comes, of course, now the front page take. This is what we feel. Patience has paid off. The strategy was stabilize the trade routes, the data policy, and then get down to negotiations. And you know what? It has worked. But as of right now, this can only be classified as an announcement. The treaty is still awaited because in this kind of exchange between nations, announcements definitely impact markets. But what makes history is signing on the dotted line. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. We'll take a short little break, and when we are back, we'll be back with a very invigorating discussion only on Front Page.